Hello friends, this is Laura from Pearls of the Hearth, and I wanted to do a quick video today to talk a little bit about a new direction that I'm moving in personally, and where I hope to take the channel as a repercussion of that. So for many years I considered myself a non-religious spiritual practitioner. I dabbled in a lot of different modalities, meditation, Eastern mysticism, Taoism, shamanism. I'm not sure if I said that yet, but you get the picture. I guess it could all fall largely under the rubric of the New Age. And I have recently taken a hard turn away from that, and I want to tell you guys why that is and share my story of coming out of that. So for context, I was raised in the Catholic Church, was baptized Catholic, and made my sacraments there. But I did not feel initially truly at home in the Catholic Church. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. For one, I was hyper aware of a certain performativity about the way the people I attended church with practiced the faith. So we always sat in the front pew and always said the prayers the loudest. And I felt like we were there to be a model for the other churchgoers. And I felt there was a hypocrisy to it, because I understood that behind closed doors, we weren't always models. And I found it deeply distressing and hypocritical and hollow. And I just didn't like it. I was very, very embarrassed to be put up front like that. And we also had a pastor of our church, the man in charge of the entire congregation, be accused of sexual impropriety with a minor. At the time they called it an affair. It was with a 15-year-old girl. So those personal experiences, and then the later revelations about sexual abuse more broadly in the church, left a bad taste in my mouth. There were a couple of beautiful bright spots, though, which I think still helped me stay connected to my early faith. For one, I had this religion teacher, Mrs. Barilli, and I took catechism class at her house. And she was just so welcoming and so nurturing. And it felt in contrast to other aspects of my life to have that nurturing home to go into. And I think she had a real authentic love of God, which marked me in a way. And it's something that was stored in me as someone who really practiced the Catholic faith in a way that I didn't see happening in my immediate environment. My grandmother, a Polish immigrant who went deaf when she was 12 years old, had an incredibly hard life. She went deaf before she learned how to speak English, but yet she still learned how to speak English and could read lips in English. Absolutely remarkable woman, so devout, and truly she had a saintly air about her, because she had suffered, and was so cheerful, such a good-humored woman. And she was very devout with her rosary. So she was a model for me, and I loved her very much. And I felt special to her. Nonetheless, I left the Catholic Church. I dabbled a bit in Protestantism. I felt I was burned by the teacher that I followed, though, a pastor who was very much into predicting the apocalypse, and that did not happen. And he was a Presbyterian who was extremely erudite in his biblical knowledge, but kind of weaponized it to the extent that he was self-righteous about his knowledge of the Bible and self-righteous about his seemingly infallibility in predicting the end of the world. So I moved away from that, and then I would say I got into a more spiritually empty place for a number of years, and was just focused on either schoolwork or regular work and a lot of partying. And it wasn't until I actually got laid off from a job, and one of my coworkers recommended that I try yoga, that I once again got into a spiritual practice. Though there's something that I have forgotten to add, and I think it's an important contextual clue to what is coming. So the other major spiritual experience I had as a Catholic prior to leaving the church was when I was 12 years old. I was laying in bed and I had my rosary beads. And I don't remember having a real practice praying the rosaries. And I think I was just holding them for protection, because I must have been feeling something negative in my house. And I was laying in bed holding the rosaries, and I looked up at the ceiling and I saw a dark cloud. And this cloud just made a beeline for me and tried to enter into my body, and it was very much a soul-level demonic attack, and I knew it for sure. And I tried to say a Hail Mary or an Our Father, but I was completely paralyzed, and I couldn't manage much. And then, by the grace of God, I said the words, "I love God," and I believe God told me to say that, and the demon left me in that instant. And I went running downstairs, and my mama and my sister were still up. I remember being kind of surprised that my sister was up, because I thought we were supposed to have the same bedtime. But in any case, I just started bawling and crying and, explaining what happened, and they both looked shocked and scared. My sister was, in particular, just absolutely appalled. And that night I slept with my mom, which was something I never did, but she allowed me to do it that night. And then for the next few nights, I had these terrible dreams of being chased and molested by this horrible clown. And my mother, by the grace of God, went to the church and brought back some holy water and a scapular. And I think she did some deliverance prayers and gave me the scapular for protection. And the nightmare stopped. And so I wanted to highlight that, because that was a very pivotal experience for me in understanding that there was darkness and that God could protect us, and that the loving God was very powerful. And I think it also planted a seed that would arise later in my life around some of the tools of spiritual warfare that the Catholic Church does have. So, in any case, I went through that in a period of no religion and then trying yoga. And I took to yoga very easily because I'm quite flexible. And I had never excelled in any kind of physical activity at all. And I am flexible but uncoordinated. So I wasn't naturally good at things like gymnastics or dance that I was aware of. But in many ways, yoga doesn't require a lot of coordination because you are told each and every move that you need to make with precise detail. And because I was naturally flexible, I could do a lot of the poses with some ease. So it was a natural fit for me, and I began to do it in earnest. And the teachers at my studio were these lovely women, very spiritually minded, and practice kirtan, which is chanting. And we chanted to Hindu gods and goddesses. And I felt very spiritually alive, very spiritually sustained at that yoga studio. And I remember attempting to go back to the Catholic Church after I had stepped into practicing yoga, and I couldn't stand to be in the Catholic Church. It felt very dry to me at that point. And I began to not only practice yoga in earnest, but I began to dabble in all other types of non-Christian practices in the occult, really. Shamanism, divination, I went to channeling sessions, you name it, I did it, and I wound up in a pagan circle. Now, I would say it wasn't as if I, went from Catholic to pagan, bolted out the gate. But instead, I liken it to being a sheep in a pasture who starts nibbling some grass and doesn't realize where she's going. And I nibbled my way lost. That was an analogy that was shared to me by an archbishop. I nibbled with the yoga. I nibbled with the chanting. I nibbled with let me go get this shamanic healing. And then I found myself pretty far out in the wilderness of spirituality. And what I will say at this juncture is I think it left me very unprotected because I was not showing good discernment about what I was doing. I only started to get uncomfortable when I wound up in the pagan circle because some of the other practitioners were really calling on other deities, which I had been doing in yoga, but when I was doing it in yoga, I was very unaware. I didn't consider it a form of worship, but I knew it was in the pagan circle. I wasn't personally doing it, but I was sitting in a circle with people who were doing it. And then, meanwhile, trying to couch my own practices in a way where I was still worshiping God. So I would pray every day to God. Any spiritual practice I had, I prayed to God emphatically. Now, God always led me to other Christians. But I interpreted that as meaning, oh, the way I worship God is fine. It's all the same God. Look, the Christians are worshiping the same God that I am. And I have come to realize, how wrong I was. I was not worshiping God the way that he wished to be worshipped, for sure. And I didn't understand the danger that I was putting myself in and my family. So when I was younger, I remember going to like a toy store and seeing a Ouija board. And my sister and I were both really interested in it. And my mother was extremely firm. No, absolutely. You will never use a Ouija board. It will open up all kinds of demonic portals. And so I was like, okay, no, I get it, Mom. Never going to use that. But I didn't understand that all forms of divination and these spiritual practices that I was in were the same kinds of tools, different names, different form, but also could open up portals that I didn't understand. And I liken it to being in your house, putting out a nice sweet dessert, and opening every door and window and inviting in whoever you want to invite in. And, having guests over there who have relationships with some not so nice things, and being surprised when something wild and gross enters into your house. So I began to feel also, a tension that I was with people who I could not express my love of God to, and I was not being authentic, and I realized that there was duplicity to it, and my conscience was pinged, sorry, saying that correctly, but it wasn't enough for me to stop until I fell into real darkness, where I was given some advice by mentors and spiritual advisors to do something that I questioned was correct, but I listened to their advice, and I took an action that put me in grave danger on all levels: physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual. And the discord in my household became so much that I had a more immediate recognition that it was demonic and that I needed help. And as I was in a state of spiritual desolation, I had a message that I should go to a revival. I'm just going to leave it there for now because I have to go pick up my son, but I will continue in a moment. So I had the message to go to a revival, and the very next day I went to a friend's party, and one of my friends arrived with a pamphlet or an advertisement for a revival or a spiritual revival that was happening at our local African American Methodist church. And she said, "Who would like to go to a revival?" And I said, "I would like to go to a revival." And it felt very much that I was being called there. Now, at this point in time, I was spiritually bereft, and in particular, I was in a state of extreme fear because I felt I was in danger, like I said, on many levels, and including physical, and I was in rough shape. And when I arrived at this church, I was so welcomed. I was welcomed with hugs and made to feel that I belonged there, despite the fact that I'm a white woman, and the very, very vast majority, I think everyone there except for one other person, was black. I was made to feel that I belonged there, and they couldn't have been kinder to me and more caring. And the particular form of Christianity that they practice, I believe, was exactly what I needed in that moment, because they, as a church, evolved in the shadow of slavery, where they must have been confronted with so many frightening, degrading possibilities in their lives at all times, because they were in many ways so physically powerless and at the mercy of the people who, quote unquote, owned them. They could be bought or sold, raped, branded, separated from their families. I mean, the amount of fear that they could be in, so overwhelming. And they recognized that fear was a tool of the devil, and that they could live their lives trembling and in fear, letting these slave owners have control over not just their bodies, but their souls if they stayed in fear. And so they developed a spirituality that was so powerful against the weapon of fear. And their weapon was joy. Their weapon was joy and fearlessness. And I can't give it justice. I can't. Their worship style was a mixture of a lot of music, very empowering music that was designed to uplift, elevate the mood, and pronounce joy and very much in the face of the devil. And I felt that they were fighting for me. And that was one of my first battles. I'm getting very emotional thinking about it. It was a very, very powerful experience. It was very powerful. It was not the moment that I decided to sleep with the OH, though. So the story continues. I went back to the circles, that I was attending, and was still fighting my spiritual battles. That summer, I went to, or maybe it wasn't the summer. I can't recall, but I went to Gettysburg with my son. We were just there for a little weekend of touring around, and we went on some ghost tours and things. So I'm, still very much being quite unaware of spiritual danger. And so I, went to haunted orphanages and haunted battlefields and all this. And then on the way back, I saw a sign for a shrine, and I felt called to go. I said to my son, would you like to go to the shrine? Now, my son is a typical 12-year-old kid at this time, boy, who is into sports and bikes and Pokemon, and not very spiritually minded, and easily bored. And I felt he was going to be bored. But that's not what happened. We got into this shrine, and both of us felt so enraptured and engaged to be there. It was a shrine of the first American saint, St. Catherine Satin. And my son was not impatient. He let me explore every aspect of the shrine, and there was a museum there. And I was very struck in particular about St. Catherine's story. She was a late convert to Catholicism and had to give up all of her friends and relations because she did that. And she was a single mother. She was a widow with many children. And, you know, even though she was a woman from the 19th century, I related to her story because I was a single mother at this point, and struggling with the idea of possibly converting. It was still just a seed in my mind, but I knew that I would have to give up community if I did that, because I had beautiful, wonderful friends in the New Age whom I loved dearly. But was maybe starting to hear a call, outside of it. I don't think I knew that it would be Catholicism for sure, but I felt, there were some signs of being called to Christ. Now, another exhibit, there was kind of a theme of anyone can be a saint. Can you be a saint? And it didn't feel like the Catholicism that I grew up in. I didn't ever consider that to be a possibility. But what they did was they took all these people who had been somehow suggested to be saints, and we looked at their lives, and they were just ordinary people. And one of the women, I don't know who it was. It might have been Dorothy Day, but I do know that she was divorced. And I remember thinking, my God, how can this divorced woman be up for sainthood? Like, I would have thought that would have been an automatic out, And I didn't understand the true mercy of the church at that point. But I was touched to see her, and then to see St. Catherine Satin's story and be able to relate to them so much. And my son and I had the most incredible time together there, picking out souvenirs at the gift shop. It was such a special moment because besides everything that was amazing and beautiful at the shrine, my son and I have very different interests and very different tastes, So for us to do something that we were both enthralled with was magical. Now, when we returned home, that's when I noticed the peace. I think at the shrine it was like, a peaceful place, and I understood something special was happening there with my son and I. But when I walked into my home, I could feel the peace of the shrine in my home. It was palpable. I knew it. I knew that it had come with us. And it was a peace that I had not experienced in my house before. And I will say I didn't experience a peace like that in any of the New Age practices that I had dabbled in for so long. It was different. You know, I've stopped meditation where I have felt peaceful in meditation, calm inside my body. But this was different in that it wasn't a calm inside my body. It was a calm that came from outside of me that I was held in. And it was quite incredible. Okay, so the next kind of big thing that happened was I had a dream that my house was filled with icons, religious icons. And at that point I was dating, and they were Christian. And at that point I was dating a Greek Orthodox man. I wasn't dating him, I won't say that. I was talking to him. And I shared my dream with him, and I asked him what he thought the dream was about. And he said, maybe you're going to convert to Greek Orthodoxy. And despite my experiences at the African American church and at the shrine, my response to that was to laugh, as if that was absolutely absurd. And he did not join me in laughing. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you laughed at something and the person you're conversing with does not join you in that laughter. And you have this moment of, oh, wait a minute, I shouldn't be laughing at this. And it gives you pause. So his lack of laughter gave me pause, and I began to research Greek Orthodoxy. And I encountered a treasure trove of wisdom. Wisdom way beyond anything I had ever encountered in the New Age. And I was soaking it up and began to ponder whether or not I should go to a Greek Orthodox church. And I started to fast around that time. It was around Lent. And I wasn't necessarily fasting as a Christian. I was fasting just kind of in a general spiritual way. And I decided that I would go back to church and that I would go back to the Catholic Church, because as much as I was finding so much wisdom in Greek Orthodoxy, I understood that the wisdom of the ages, of that, thousands of years of tradition was for millennials shared with the Catholic Church. And there was a shared foundational wisdom that somehow I had missed out on completely in my upbringing, that I wanted to engage with. And I also recognized that I had been in terrible rebellion for so many years, that I wanted to do something that was not rebellious, because I was baptized Catholic. I was confirmed Catholic, and I had made vows to be a Catholic, and I wanted to honor that. So I went back to the Catholic Church and started with some daily Mass. And it was, I think, the Sunday before Easter, which is Divine Mercy Sunday. And Divine Mercy Sunday is a day where you can get absolution for all your sins in a unique way. And it was something that was, I think, founded through the intercession of Saint Faustina. And my Polish grandmother, who is extremely devout, had a special love of Saint Faustina and had always wanted family members to go and confess on Divine Mercy. And so this was my first confession in 30 years. I mean, I may have made some very minor confessions, but I brought with me decades of rebellion against God to the confessional. And I literally had to bring a journal in with all of the grievous things that I had done. And I was very ashamed, very embarrassed, and I was met with love. I was met with mercy. And the confession in that church takes place during adoration. So I went from confessing 30 years worth of sin, sitting in front of the Holy Eucharist, and I experienced visceral level spiritual renewal like I cannot put words to. It was very visceral, that like shedding of deep weight, and my heart, I believe, being flooded by the Holy Spirit. And I understood the power of confession, and I understood the power of adoration. And I understood the great peace that is promised in Christianity. And that was, for me, I think, the moment of my conversion. There's one other story I will share. I had a dream that I was in a hell realm. And I'd actually, if you see the picture on the thumbnail, it's quite similar. Monkey-winged creatures, but I was there alone in this lifeless realm. There was, no sun, completely dark, and no life, trees, grass, nothing, just complete desolate, empty. And I was with these winged creatures, and I was told, "You need Margaret." And when I woke up, I understood that to be a message, and that I should research Margaret, and I knew that she would be someone that could spiritually help me. And I was led to information on Margaret Alacoque, who is the one of the founders of the devotion of the Sacred Heart. And one of the promises of the Sacred Heart is, if you have an image of the Sacred Heart in the center of your house, that you can restore order to your home. peace, and order. And that has been my deepest prayer. So devotion to the Sacred Heart, along with the practice of the Rosary, has transformed my home. And the vast majority of the demonic strife that I was seeing in my family has resolved. The battle is not over by any means. It continues, Much more recently, I've started to, really just like within the past few days, I started to say the Liturgy of the Hours. And as I understand that practice, it's a way of bringing the Mass into your home. And I can tell you, when you bring the Mass into your home, it brings a palpable peace into your home. It turns your home into a sacred space. Now, what I will say about leaving the New Age is that, I left the New Age practices behind. I was very upfront with anyone I practiced with of my new spiritual beliefs. And I'm not here to judge them for doing, what they're doing. And I have tremendous, tremendous love for them because they were the kindest people to me, as far as I'm concerned. And there were so many amazing, beautifully intended people there. And I, in my past, had met many holier than thou type religious people who I did not resonate as well with. And so, I'm kind of in between two homes right now. My home in the Catholic Church, but haven't quite found my people, I suppose, and I am praying for my friends who are in the New Age, and I do want them to join me, because I have had these direct very, very profound experiences of the negative repercussions of engaging in spiritual practices that can open you up to things that you don't realize you're opening yourself up to. And what I will liken this to is when I was in the New Age, I would say I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And I would get annoyed at religious people because I believed that they were kind of missing the point. And there's a saying that religion is a signpost to God, and many people stop at the sign and begin to worship the sign instead of moving on to their final destination. And in the past, I saw that as like reason for why I wasn't religious and why I could practice my spirituality in any way that I saw fit. But what I have come to realize is that there is thousands of years of wisdom that is meant to spiritually protect you. That is, that a religion is formed by the Word of God, by the traditions of the churches, by the hard-won wisdom of church elders who've come before me that can help me from making dire mistakes because I think I can go it alone. So religion is the signpost. Religion is a path. But taking the path that has been well trod for generations, generations by my ancestors, is meant to protect me, not stifle me. And I often had seen obedience as somehow constricting. I didn't understand that obedience could help me, protect me, could make sure that I was under the good graces of the almighty powerful being. And I think it was spiritually ignorant and spiritually arrogant of me to think that my ancestors were all wrong and they had nothing to offer me, and the church had nothing to offer me. And yes, I don't want to be one of those legalistic, holier than thou type of person who just stays at the signpost and doesn't understand the point of religion, which is to commune with God. But to be someone who is part of a religious practice that can bring me safely there. So that's where I am right now, and I wanted to share that. I hope it's helpful, but I think the type of content that I will share in the future is probably going to be related very much to this conversion experience and the tools that are helping me going forward on my spiritual path. And I hope that you found this interesting and that you will continue to join me on this journey. Thank you for listening.